My day always begins at 6:30 a.m. This morning, I woke up before my smartphone alarm went off. Next to me, Andrew was breathing peacefully in his sleep. I tied my long brown hair back with a hair tie, gently kissed his cheek, and started my new day. Standing in the kitchen, the morning sun streams through the sink window. It's been 5 years since we moved to this house in the Shadow Lane district of Newton. This white colonial is the perfect home for our family. The dew-covered front lawn is one of my weekend maintenance pleasures. On weekends, we host barbecue parties on the patio, cherishing time with neighboring families. I chose to work from home as a marketing consultant because I wanted to prioritize family time. My meticulous and organized personality helps me balance work and family life. I had already prepared the materials for today's 9 a.m. online meeting last night. While putting a bagel in the toaster, I remember the 2014 Boston Business Conference. That coffee break where I met Andrew. I was captivated by his impressive 5 feet 11 inches frame and intellectual conversation. As an investment advisory firm manager handling transactions from Boston to New York, he's away on business trips several times a month. But his family service during holidays is perfect. His unexpected gifts for me and Lily demonstrate his thoughtfulness. This morning began with the same tranquility as always. The soft sunlight streaming through the window brings spring warmth to the kitchen counter. It's the season when you can smell new buds. I woke up at 6:30 a.m. as usual and started preparing breakfast. Bagels and scrambled eggs for Andrew and Lily. Greek yogurt for me. On the table, cold orange juice gleams like morning dew in the glasses. A perfect morning scene. Yet somewhere in the corner of my mind, there lingered a faint anxiety. Perhaps it was because of the dream I had last night. "Good morning, Mom." Lily's footsteps running down the stairs dispel that anxiety. She's full of energy today too. Her Mason Rice Elementary School uniform gleams in the spring sunlight. "Good morning, everyone." Andrew joins us at the table with his newspaper. His refreshing smile completely erases the small anxiety within me. Another love-filled morning begins to flow. I have a math test today. I studied yesterday too, so I'm sure I'll get a perfect score. Lily happily talks while poking at her scrambled eggs with her fork. Her profile looks like a little angel. I can't help but smile. That's right. You reviewed thoroughly yesterday. Mom, this orange juice is so delicious. Our usual conversation echoes pleasantly in the kitchen. Andrew occasionally checks stock prices while nodding and listening to our daughter's chatter. How precious these ordinary morning moments are. Around 8:15, Lily starts adjusting her uniform collar. Her LL Bean backpack contains textbooks and writing materials, just as we checked last night. We've also done the final review for the math test. Lily, don't forget your scarf. It's still chilly in the morning. At the entrance, I do a final check of my daughter's appearance. Fixing her brown hair, checking her uniform buttons, readying her shoelaces. These little attentions are my happiness as a mother. I'm fine, Mom. It's time to go. 8:30 a.m. Our usual departure time. Be careful today. Good luck on your test. After a final hug, Lily left the house. While watching her walk away, I wave multiple times. She turns back, smiling and waving in return. That gesture remains vivid in my memory. As I was about to start preparing for my 9 a.m. online meeting, the phone suddenly rang. A familiar school number. The clock showed 9:15 a.m. Mrs. Mitchell. Your daughter hasn't arrived at school this morning. With those words, it felt like the world stopped. Blood drained from my face. My ears were ringing. What? But I definitely saw her off at 8:30. My voice was trembling. My throat was dry. Something might have happened on the way to school. Could you come right away? Yes, I'll be there immediately. With shaking fingers, I canceled the 9 a.m. meeting. My hands trembled as I typed the email, making multiple mistakes. I called Andrew, but there was no answer. He was probably in an important meeting. I left a voicemail message. Though I tried to keep my voice calm, I couldn't hide the panic. Andrew, call me back immediately. Lily hasn't arrived at school. While waiting for the taxi, various possibilities raced through my mind. A traffic accident. Kidnapping. Did she get lost? The more I thought, the worse my imagination grew. The few minutes waiting for the taxi with my wallet and coat grabbed from the entrance felt like an eternity. Outside the window, the peaceful spring sunshine continued as usual. A neighbor was tending her garden. A mailman cycled past. Everything was a normal morning, but my world alone was rapidly distorting. Jumping into the taxi, I desperately tried to remember the morning scene while watching the route to school. Lily's smile, her uniform collar, backpack, shoelaces, everything had been normal. Or was it really normal? Had I missed something? The streetscape reflected in the car window felt like another world. In the taxi following the school route, I clasped my hands together as if in prayer. Never had this 15-minute journey felt so long. Please be safe. My whisper reached no one. The taxi caught a red light, and that red signal only amplified my anxiety. As a mother, why hadn't I been more careful? Why hadn't I accompanied her to school? As waves of self-reproach washed over me, the taxi continued toward the school. When the taxi arrived at school, Vice Principal Mrs. Thompson was already waiting at the front entrance. Seeing my distressed state, she gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Mrs. Mitchell, let's stay calm first. We'll check the security camera footage. The hallway to the vice principal's office felt strangely long. The children's artwork decorating the walls, usually a heartwarming sight, now seemed oddly distorted. Mrs. Walker, Lily's homeroom teacher, would join us too. Her presence provided a small measure of comfort. The vice principal's office felt more suffocating than ever. The wall clock showed 10 a.m. While voices of children taking PE class could be heard from the courtyard through the window, this room alone was wrapped in an eerie silence. Mrs. Thompson operated the computer, and footage appeared on the large monitor. An intersection on the school route. Time, 8:45 a.m. A familiar scene spread before us in monochrome. Here it is. At Mrs. Walker's voice, I held my breath. Lily's small figure appeared in the footage. Wearing her LL Bean backpack, walking with her usual gait. Then, a high school girl appeared from the edge of the screen. A navy blazer and checkered skirt. A high school girl in a neat uniform approached Lily. My heart began to race. That's Newton North High School's uniform. Mrs. Thompson's words seemed to come from far away. In the footage, the high school girl was talking to Lily. My daughter stopped and began conversing with her. Without audio, we couldn't tell what they were discussing. But Lily's expression was smiling. Lily. My hoarse voice echoed in the quiet room. Then, in the next moment, an unbelievable scene unfolded before our eyes. The high school girl offered her hand to Lily, and my daughter took it without hesitation. The two walked off screen hand in hand, looking like sisters. Mrs. Mitchell. Mrs. Walker's voice brought me back to reality. But no words came from my mouth. My mind went blank, as if thought had stopped. We should contact the police. Mrs. Thompson's calm judgment barely kept my consciousness intact. Yes, we should. A feeble reply that didn't seem like my own voice. Mrs. Walker sat beside me and gently held my hand. I'll stay with you. Outside the window, children's bright voices continued to echo. A cloudless blue sky stretched overhead, spring sunshine pouring down. But my world felt enveloped in darkness. Why had Lily gone with a strange high school student? Why hadn't she shown any caution? Questions kept arising. But even more terrifying was the fact that my daughter had shown no resistance at all. While Mrs. Thompson called the police, I replayed the footage multiple times. Trying to memorize Lily's expression, the high school girl's features. Navy blazer, long black hair, slender build. Newton North High School uniform. This information kept spinning in my confused mind. The police will come right away. Hearing those words, I continued to stare at Lily's final smile on the monitor. Why hadn't I hugged her more tightly then? Such regret was squeezing my heart. The police officers arrived at the vice principal's office at 10:30 a.m. Detective Johnson and Officer Parker. They immediately began assessing the situation. While I explained with my trembling voice, Officer Parker took detailed notes. You mentioned a Newton North High School uniform, we'll verify that. Detective Johnson efficiently contacted the high school. Meanwhile, I showed the police officers photos of Lily. The many smiling faces saved on my smartphone. Just 2 hours ago, it had been an ordinary morning scene. Based on the uniform characteristics, there's no mistake. We'll now cross-reference with student photos. The police officers divided up to check the photo data sent from Newton North High School. Photos of female students appeared one after another on the monitor. I strained my eyes desperately. That black hair, slender build, gentle expression. Let's check the surrounding security cameras too. Officer Parker spread out a map, indicating camera locations along the school route. Convenience store corners, bank ATMs, intersection surveillance cameras. The watchful eyes of modern society had now become our hope. Here it is. My heart raced each time new footage was found. The backs of the two captured on the bank's ATM. Their profiles caught on the convenience store's security camera. Then a decisive piece of footage was found. They seemed to be heading toward Newton Free Library. The two in the screen looked just like real sisters. Lily appeared to be talking about something occasionally, looking up at the high school girl. Her expression showed not a trace of anxiety. "Let's go to the library." When I got into the patrol car, my anxiety had slightly eased. At least, Lily was smiling. There were no signs of her being harmed. Still, my maternal worry didn't disappear. Arriving at the library, another team had already begun checking inside. We proceeded through the silent building, muffling our footsteps. As we climbed the stairs to the children's book corner on the second floor, my heartbeat became intense again. And then it suddenly spread out before us. In the soft sunlight filtering through the bookshelves, Lily sat next to the high school girl. A picture book was open in front of them, and Lily was intently listening to her read. Her expression was utterly peaceful. "Lily." At my voice, both turned their faces. "Mom? Why are you here?" Lily looked puzzled. The high school girl beside her slowly stood up. Her expression showed no malice as we had expected. Rather, there was something like sadness in it. "I'm sorry." The high school girl's voice left a strange resonance in the library's silence. At that moment, a woman in her 40s approached from the back of the children's corner. A librarian wearing a badge. Her expression showed a kind of resolution. "Let me explain." The librarian's voice was quiet but firm. At that moment, I intuitively understood. This wasn't just a girl's whimsical action. There was something deeper, more complex involved. The police officers exchanged glances, seemingly grasping the situation. Detective Johnson began radioing headquarters. In the library's silence, only the clock's second hand ticked distinctly clearly. An hour after the truth was revealed in the library's conference room, we turned at the sudden sound of the door opening. There stood Andrew. His usual refreshing expression was gone, his face pale as he surveyed the conference room. "Rebecca." His eyes caught me first, then moved to Hannah, then to Susan. The past he thought he had abandoned 15 years ago had become reality before his eyes. "Dad." Hannah's trembling voice cut through the heavy air. I stood up and stared at my husband, no, the man I could no longer call my husband. Realizing that our happy married life had been built entirely on lies, anger and sadness welled up inside me. "Why?" To my question, Andrew stumbled over his words. The man who had met a woman at Stanford using the false name Michael Baker, then disappeared to escape responsibility. That same man had acted the perfect husband in my family. "I'm sorry, truly sorry." Andrew's words of apology rang hollow. At that moment, Lily returned from the other room. Not understanding the situation, our daughter innocently rushed to her sister Hannah's side. "Dad, look. This is my big sister. She read picture books with me." Lily's pure joy made the adults' expressions in the room twist complexly. "Lily." Susan had desperately raised her daughter for 15 years. Working earnestly as a librarian, never resenting the past, living forward. That strength and dignity now seemed to crush Andrew. Hannah showed a complex expression, torn between her father and sister. The father she had searched for so long, and the sister she had finally found. I felt a pang seeing the hope and anxiety cross in the 15-year-old girl's eyes. What should we do now? At Andrew's weak voice, I coldly turned my back. An escape that began with one lie had now derailed so many lives. An irreparable mistake weighed heavy in the room's atmosphere. Yet seeing Lily's innocent smile and Hannah's hopeful gaze, it felt like this might not be an ending, but rather the beginning of something new. Outside the window, the spring sun had begun to set. Everyone felt that this day would be a turning point in all our lives. A week had passed since the shocking encounter at the library. On a peaceful Sunday afternoon, we gathered at a cafe in Newton. The first step toward calmly discussing the situation. The adults sat facing each other at a large windowside table. Lily was at the bookshelf corner with Hannah, looking at books. Everyone held complex feelings watching the sisters' close relationship. Let me start first. Andrew opened his heavy mouth. His meeting with Susan 15 years ago at Stanford University Library. At the time, he was staying on the West Coast to study investment. Using the false name Michael Baker, he lied about inheriting his family's pharmaceutical company. I was afraid of responsibility. At his confession, Susan quietly lowered her eyes. When she discovered her pregnancy, Andrew was already gone, and all contact information left behind was false. 15 years of desperately working as a librarian while raising Hannah alone. And then, perhaps it was fate, Susan continued. I got the librarian position at Newton Library and moved to this town. Time passed, bringing my marriage to Andrew and Lily's birth. A seemingly perfect family life. But when Andrew learned of Susan and Hannah's presence at the library, he chose escape again. Pretending not to know, continuing to turn away from the past. Without the DNA test, this would have. I cut off Andrew's words with a cold look. The DNA database where Hannah's grandparents registered for genealogical research. The relative matching that began there. Our family photos found on social media. The truth emerged in unexpected ways. I wanted to meet Lily, Hannah spoke quietly. When I learned I had a sister, I waited at the library every day. In our line of sight, Lily was showing Hannah a new book. The time flowing between the sisters seemed untouched by the adults' complicated circumstances. I have something to say too. I spoke with determination. Divorce was an unavoidable choice. But I wanted to maintain the children's relationship. Lily delighted in having a sister, and Hannah treasured time with her sister. No one had the right to break that pure bond. Let's make time for the sisters to spend weekends together. Susan quietly nodded at my suggestion. Though the adults were wounded, we would seek a new form for the children's sake. Perhaps that was our only atonement. Mom, look. Lily's voice rang out. Big sister showed me an astronomy book. The sisters' smiles slightly softened the cafe's atmosphere. The path ahead won't be smooth. Divorce proceedings, child support issues, visitation arrangements. Problems to solve pile high. Still, to protect the children's smiles, the adults must build new relationships. Every Saturday, at the library. Susan's suggestion became a concrete first step. A place where the sisters can spend time safely. The library she had preciously guarded for 15 years would become the stage for a new family story. Spring sunlight reflected and wavered in the coffee cups on the table. The anger and sadness hadn't completely disappeared. Yet watching the children's pure bond, feelings of forgiveness began to sprout little by little. From now on, I'll live honestly. This time, no one directed cold glances at Andrew's words. While we can't change the past, the future is different. There are things we adults can do for the children's smiles. In the Twilight Cafe, we were about to take a new step. Though not a perfect family, we would acknowledge each other's positions and prioritize the children's happiness. That was our answer, found through this trial. Next time, I want to go to the zoo, Lily's innocent voice rang out. That would be nice, Hannah nodded gently. Outside the window, the spring dusk was softly enveloping the town. A new family story begins here. Healing wounded hearts while moving forward, step by step, but steadily. That was the path we had chosen. 3 years later in spring, I parked my car in front of Newton Free Library. Saturday afternoon, as usual, I had come to pick up my daughters. Through the library's large windows, I could see Lily and Hannah. The two were still close, sitting in their usual spot in the children's corner. Today was special. Hannah had received her college acceptance letter. She had been accepted to Harvard University's Library and Information Science Department. She had chosen to follow in her mother Susan's footsteps. Rebecca. I turned to find Andrew standing there. After the divorce, he continued to change steadily. He had quit his investment advisory job and now worked as a financial counselor, helping single parents with economic support. The counseling appointment is tomorrow, right? He continues to attend family counseling once a week. His attitude of facing the past and trying to fulfill his responsibilities to both families was, at least, sincere. Yes. And this. He handed me 2 envelopes. One for Hannah's college tuition, the other for Lily's middle school entrance fees. It was proof that he had prioritized saving for the children's education, separate from child support. Susan says she'll finish early today. Susan, continuing to work as a librarian, had become the head of the library's children's department. The Sisters Reading Program, she proposed, had become a popular community event. We always have dinner together on weekends. The once awkward dining table now hosts natural conversations. Sometimes laughter can be heard. Though not a perfect relationship, each has found their role and walks forward. Dad. Lily came running from the library to Andrew. He gently embraced his daughter. Behind her, Hannah approached slowly, shyly showing her father the acceptance letter. Congratulations, Hannah. Tears gleamed in Andrew's eyes. I watched this scene from a short distance. Perhaps wounded hearts never heal completely. But the children's happy smiles gradually soften us adults' hearts. Cherry blossom petals danced in the sky. That day 3 years ago was in this same season. What I thought was an ending then, I now understand was actually a new beginning. Andrew now lives earnestly, fulfilling his responsibilities to both families. It's atonement, and perhaps also a new form of love. Though there's no perfect ending, we're each moving forward in our own way. In front of the library, cherry blossom petals continued to dance. As if announcing the beginning of a new season.